Okay, let's picture this. You're in bustling Saturday market, maybe in a small Indian town. You hear the vendors calling out, families are, picking out groceries. And then maybe you see a young professional looking closely at a new smartphone, thinking about the price. These moments, the everyday buying and selling, they're basically the heartbeat of India's economy. And today, we're doing a deep dive into how a huge tax reform is set to shake things up, promising more spending, but also raising some big questions. We're talking about GST 2.0. This is India's biggest tax change since the first GST back in 2017. It's not just about numbers. It could really shift things for millions of people. It was announced September 3rd, 2025, and it's starting September 22nd. So our mission today, to get past the headlines, we'll unpack GST 2.0, look at how people in India actually live and spend, given the huge inequalities. And we'll try to figure out if lower taxes really mean everyone starts buying more, or if it's more complicated. We want to give you the real picture, plain and simple. Let's get into it.
So when we think about what drives India's economy, it's not just factories or exports, right? It's people. 1.4 billion people making choices every day. I saw this figure, private consumption, basically household spending, makes up something like 61% of India's GDP in fiscal 2025. That's huge, even more than many developed countries. What does that tell us?
It tells us everything, almost. Consumption is the Indian economy in many ways. That scale means any policy affecting spending is, well, critical. When people spend more, businesses make more, they hire more. The whole cycle speeds up. We saw it really clearly after the 2020 lockdowns, didn't we? Suddenly, huge demand for bikes, tractors in rural areas, and city folks were buying gadgets, going out, and festivals like Diwali, they just pour fuel on that fire, economically speaking.
That's a great point. So to really get GST 2.0, we probably need that quick look back you mentioned. Yeah. Rewind to 2017, July 1st, GST 1.0. Before that, it was, messy, wasn't it? Central excise, state VAT, service taxes. A real tangle. People called it tax terrorism.
Exactly. And the launch itself in 2017 was pretty dramatic, remember? It felt like this big national event, but then it turned into a scramble for a lot of businesses. There were protests. The IT portal they launched for filing returns kept crashing. It had a lot of problems. Plus, you still had the shadow of demonetization hanging over everything. Yeah. Growth actually dipped, remember, to 6.6% in 2018. Some definitely blamed the GST rollout issues.
Right, that was a rocky start. So what did they learn from that? What changed between then and now to pave the way for this 2.0 version?
Yeah, that's key. What's interesting is how the system did evolve despite those problems. The original slabs, 5, 12, 18, 28%, they were tweaked over time. Lessons were learned, especially during COVID, which put unique pressures on everything. But the really big thing, the tax base just exploded. It went from about 6.5 million businesses registered in 2017 to over 15 million by 2025. That formalization, bringing more businesses into the tax net, boosted revenues massively, up to 20 lakh crore annually by FY 2024-25. So that experience kind of showed that formalization works even if it's bumpy initially. It built a stronger foundation, making a big reform like 2.0 seem, more feasible.
Okay, so that brings us to now. September 2025, GST 2.0 is about to launch. The economy is doing better, 7-8% growth. Seems like the government saw this as the right moment to simplify further.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And the big question for you listening is, what's actually changing for your budget? The headline is, they've basically gotten rid of the 12% and 28% slabs for most things. Big change. Now, it's much cleaner. You've got 0% on essentials, basic food, milk, fresh stuff. Then 5% for a lot of everyday goods. Then 18% for many other items. And then this new 40% slab, that's specifically for demerit goods, pan masala, tobacco, very sugary drinks, kind of a sin tax. The idea there is discouraging unhealthy stuff while getting more revenue from those who buy them off the more affluent. Oh, and gold and silver jewelry stay at 3%.
Right. Okay, so this is where you can really feel it, like packaged foods, biscuits, maybe pasta, things that were 12% or 18%, they mostly dropped to 5%.
Yeah.
Could mean, 5-10% cheaper? That's noticeable.
It could be, yes. And it gets bigger in other areas. Electric vehicles, for example, down to 5%. On a 10 lakh rupee car, that could save you maybe 1.3 lakh rupees. That's a serious incentive for EVs, for green mobility.
Wow.
Medical devices, too, down to 5%, making healthcare potentially a bit more affordable. But then, flip side, those fizzy drinks jump way up to 40%. Soda lovers might feel that pinch. But the government says that extra revenue will help fund public health. So there's a trade-off.
I see.
The main goal, though, is absolutely simplicity. The government thinks it might lose about 48,000 crore in revenue initially.
Okay.
But they expect better compliance because it's simpler, plus overall growth, to make that up pretty quickly, maybe within a year or two. Some economists are even saying this could add like 0.6% to GDP growth.
That's quite optimistic. And the logic is, simpler system, businesses save time and money on figuring out taxes, maybe pass savings on, like cleaning up your kitchen, easier to find things, less hassle.
Yeah, that's a good analogy, especially for smaller businesses, MSMEs. Less complexity, fewer classifications to worry about. Over 90% of goods are now in fewer slabs. That means less paperwork, maybe less need for expensive consultants. That helps their bottom line. And it should smooth out the whole input tax credit process too. But your kitchen analogy also raises the key question, doesn't it? Just because the kitchen is tidier, does it mean everyone suddenly starts eating a lot more, or is it more complex?
Exactly. And that brings us to the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
Inequality. Before we get too excited about potential savings, India's spending power is incredibly uneven. This Household Consumption Expenditure Survey, the HCES for 2023-24, it surveyed over 260,000 households. It really lays bare the gap, right?
It really does. It's quite stark. I mean, look at the extremes. The bottom 5% in rural India, maybe landless workers in Bihar, UP, they get by on just 1,677 per person per month.
Just over 1,600 rupees.
Wow. Contrast that with the top 5% in cities like Mumbai or Delhi. They're spending 20,310 per person per month.
20,000 versus 1,600. That's more than 10 times the spending power?
It's a huge gap. And even averages show urban spending is about 70% higher than rural. But the inequality exists within both areas too. You know, India's Gini coefficient looks relatively low on paper, around 25.5, which suggests less inequality than some places. But critics often argue that consumption data might not fully capture the huge incomes at the very top. So the real divide could be even wider.
Okay, so that massive gap.
Yeah.
How does it translate into what people actually buy? What do those different shopping carts look like?
It's like two different worlds. For the poorest rural families, food just dominates everything. 65% of their tiny budget goes on staples, rice, wheat, basic vegetables, mostly untaxed or taxed at the lowest rates anyway. Imagine an Odisha family spending maybe 1,000 euros on grains, 500 on veg. There's just nothing left over.
Right, and the top end.
Completely different picture. For the wealthier groups, food is maybe 30–40% of their budget. That leaves room for packaged foods, eating out imported stuff, all things that attract more GST. They buy the durables, ACs, smartphones, often at 18% GST. They spend on services, streaming, travel, gyms, again, usually 18%. Actually, the urban top 5%. They spend about 15% of their whole budget just on entertainment.
15%.
Yeah. Meanwhile, for the bottom 20% of Indians, food plus fuel is about 70% of their spending. There's simply no space for anything discretionary.
So, okay, if prices drop on some items due to GST 2.0, why doesn't that automatically mean everyone buys more?
It comes down to economics 101, really. Demand elasticity. How much does your buying change when the price changes? For someone well off, a 5% price cut on a 50,000 rupee TV, yeah, that might make them buy it. Their demand is elastic, it stretches with the price change.
Okay.
But for someone struggling, whose budget is maxed out on survival, their demand for most non-essentials is highly inelastic. A slightly cheaper soap bar doesn't mean they buy more soap if they're worried about rent or food. Price isn't the main barrier, income is.
Right. Their demand is, as you said, rationed by poverty.
Exactly. And some studies are projecting that maybe 70% of the total savings from these GST cuts will actually end up benefiting the top 40% of earners.
70%.
Which could potentially even widen that consumption gap we talked about. Like offering a discount on yachts to fishermen, nice idea, but doesn't really help their situation.
That yacht analogy is powerful. It really highlights the potential limitations. But let's be fair. GST 2.0 isn't just about consumption stimulation. There are other definite plus points, right?
Oh, absolutely. We shouldn't dismiss the real wins. The simplification itself is massive for businesses. Think about small traders. They were hit hard back in 2017. Easier filing, faster refunds under 2.0. That's a genuine help. Reduces their costs, their headaches.
And the broader impact, beyond just individual businesses feeling relief.
Well, the formalization trend is huge. We said the tax base more than doubled since 2017, bringing more small and medium enterprises, MSMEs, into the formal system. That means more transparency, potentially better access to loans for them, and ultimately it supports more stable jobs. Even specific sectors like handicrafts moving to 5% GST. That helps preserve cultural heritage and supports rural livelihoods. It is definitely a big step towards that good and simple tax ideal.
Okay, so it simplifies, helps businesses, encourages formalization, all good things. But if the tax cuts alone might not be enough to really kickstart broad demand from everyone, what else needs to happen? What are the bigger levers to pull to get more spending power distributed more widely?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Or maybe the trillion rupee question here. If consumption is the engine, but the fuel isn't reaching all parts, you have to look beyond just tweaking the tax rates. It really has to start with incomes, especially rural incomes, which have been pretty flat for years. They need a boost.
Are there ways to do that? Existing programs, maybe?
Definitely. Look at schemes like MGN-RGA, the Rural Employment Guarantee. It gives 100 days of work at a minimum wage, around 378 a day now in many places. In 2025-26, it reached 12 crore workers. Building useful things like ponds and roads, expanding that or similar job programs helps directly. Skill development, too, like the PMKVY scheme, training young people for factory jobs, service jobs. That's shown to lift wages by 20–30%. That makes a real difference.
Right, direct employment and better skills.
And don't forget public services and social safety nets. Free healthcare through Ayushman Bharat covers 50 crore people. That directly cuts catastrophic health costs that can just wipe out a poor family's savings.
That's a crucial point. Less out-of-pocket spending on emergencies frees up money. What about direct benefit transfers, DBT? We hear a lot about those.
Yes, DBT is really interesting. By sending subsidies or benefits directly to bank accounts, it's saved a huge amount, maybe 3.48 lakh crore by 2025, just by cutting out leakage and corruption. It reaches 80 crore people. And studies show that one delivered via DBT tends to multiply about 1.5 times in the local economy. People spend it locally quickly.
More bang for the buck than some tax cuts, potentially.
Potentially, yes, especially for stimulating bottom-up demand. Look at Kerala. They combined DBT with strong public health and saw rural consumption jump 25% over a decade. If you could scale that kind of impact nationally, maybe significantly increase the MGN-RGA budget, for instance, to say 1 lakh crore, that could really inject demand where it's needed most.
This has been really illuminating. So we've seen GST 2.0, simplifying taxes, probably offering some relief, pushing formalization, good steps. But we've also stared right at India's massive inequality. That huge range from just 1,677 minus a month for survival up to over 20,000 word for others pursuing dreams.
Exactly. So the final thought for you listening as you watch India's economy is this. GST 2.0 is helpful. It might provide a bit of a buffer against global issues, like maybe potential U.S. tariffs, but real, widespread, consumption-led growth, that seems to need more than just tax tweaks. It likely needs a direct focus on tackling that inequality, pushing for higher wages, stronger safety nets, making sure essential services truly reach everyone. So as September 22nd arrives and this reform takes effect, the market's waiting. But perhaps the bigger question is whether India is building towards a truly shared prosperity. Will this latest reform be a catalyst for that, or just another step in a story still defined by stark contrasts? Something to watch.